Netflix's Death Note is the result of writing Death Note in a Death Note. I know I'm a little late to the party making a video about this movie, but my extreme distaste for Netflix's Death Note adaptation has been festering in the back of my mind for over a year, and I need to exercise my frustrations. For those of you who don't know, Death Note is my favorite anime of all time. I watch the series at least once a month in between other programs. I wrote my senior philosophy thesis on the series, and I've covered both the first opening and ending theme on my channel with varying degrees of quality. It's an understatement to say I love Death Note. When Netflix first announced they purchased the rights to adapt the manga into a live-action film, I was actually really excited. Until that point, Netflix had a good track record with their exclusive releases, and Death Note seemed like it would fit right at home on their streaming platform. As time went on, and we started to learn more about the movie, I started to get less and less excited for this adaptation. I was very hesitant, but optimistic that Netflix knew what they were doing since they cast Willem Dafoe as Ryuk. In the same vein, maybe the rest of the cast would be more suitable for the characters they were portraying than I initially believed. I held out a lot of hope until we got the first trailer, and I was a little unsatisfied with what we saw.
That's light? Why is Misa using a taser? Is that a chase sequence? Why are they falling off of a Ferris wheel? What the fuck?
The trailer did nothing but confirm my fears about the direction this adaptation was taking. It was obvious the Death Note Netflix would be giving us was not the Death Note I've come to love over the past decade. I know a lot of people who say you can't compare the Netflix movie to the source material because they're completely different, which I would normally agree with. Oftentimes, changes have to be made to something when adapting it into a new medium. It's part of the process, which is why I don't hate this movie because it differs from the source material. There are plenty of fantastic movies which barely resemble the property or story they're adapting. Captain America's Civil War is the perfect example. The film barely resembles the comic, aside from the basic premise and a few visual parallels, but it still manages to tell a compelling story that general audiences and fans of the source material really enjoyed. Death Note, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It takes everything fans loved from the source material and spits in its face. The anime version of Death Note revolves around an intellectual battle of ideals between two of the smartest people in the world trying to outplay each other in an attempt to make the world more just. Whereas the Netflix adaptation tells the story of two horny teenagers who get off on killing people and ultimately turn on each other. Yet, for some reason, they share their main cast of characters, albeit different interpretations. My original plan was to break this essay into two halves. One where I critiqued the film as a standalone property, and another where I critiqued it as an adaptation. The problem I ran into is the way Netflix's Death Note is structured. This adaptation is a melting pot of story elements and characters that are completely original to the Netflix film, and elements from the manga forced in with little to no context because it was in the source material. Because of this, it makes it nearly impossible to talk about this film without mentioning the anime or manga. For example, there's a scene around the 40-minute mark of the movie where L, the world's greatest detective, uses a live broadcast to confront Kira, aka Light, the serial killer who fills the movie's role of an anti-hero. This is a direct parallel to a scene that appears in the anime. The problem stems from the interaction between L and Light's father, Detective Turner, following the broadcast. L says,
"We know that he wants to kill me, but is unable."
But nothing in the movie up until this point indicates that Kira antagonizes law enforcement. In the anime version of this scene, L sends a stand-in to do the broadcast, and when Kira kills him, it shows L that Kira will go after anyone trying to stop him. The logic from the version of this scene in the anime carries over to the Netflix film without proper setup. In the Netflix film, Kira doesn't kill anyone investigating him until the scene following L's discussion with Light's father. Things like this are a reoccurring issue throughout the entire movie. Most of the conflicts between Light and L exist solely based on logic introduced in the anime and manga that are completely absent from the film. This makes it impossible for Netflix's drastically different take on the Death Note story to stand on its own. That being said, I honestly have to commend director Adam Wingard for what he tried to do with this movie. He clearly had an idea for an original Death Note story in his head that he was really passionate about, and did his best to bring that vision to life while pleasing fans of the original series, which I respect. But if you're gonna differ from the source material in such a drastic way, don't half-ass the changes. I would have much rather seen a completely different interpretation of the Death Note story than one that keeps the original cast but changes the core principles of those characters' personalities and motivations. The Japanese live-action films tried to do this recently in Death Note: Light Up the New World, which was terrible for its own reasons, but tried to do something mostly original, and I really like that idea. In the real world, different people would use the Death Note differently, which is why if Netflix wanted to tell a story about two high school romantics trying to change the world using the Death Note and turning on each other, they should tell that story. Don't introduce L and Watari or adapt the character names from the manga for the sake of pleasing fans, because it's gonna piss them off just as much, if not more, for the misrepresentation of things they care a lot about. Calling Nat Wolf's character Light when his personality couldn't differ more from the manga is only a detriment to the new story you're attempting to tell, because people will always compare the two characters and their respective arcs. Something they did change completely was the way that Kira kills his victims. Instead of having the criminals die of heart attacks, like in the anime, Netflix made the decision to use more violent causes of death and visualize them in a similar fashion to the Final Destination movies. I really like the idea of showing the deaths in a unique way, but the problem with changing Kira's default method of killing is it brings up the question, how do you know which criminals died of natural causes and which criminals were killed by Kira? In the beginning of the film, you often see victims using their blood to write things like, Lord Kira has returned to punish the wicked, to help establish Kira's identity. But we're also shown numerous deaths where there's no direct tie to Kira. An instance of identifying one of these deaths is played off as one of L's brilliant deductions, but as the viewer, we know his deduction is wrong, which makes him look stupid. The fact Film L is able to come to the conclusion Light Turner is Kira with extreme ease based partly on an incorrect hypothesis is more luck and the stupidity of Light's character than it is good detective work. At the end of the movie, Light's father reveals that he solved the case, and Kira's first victim was actually the criminal who murdered Light's mother. This would be a really powerful character moment if he was correct. But again, as the viewer, we know the first victim was one of Light's classmates, and it makes his father look foolish because the correct answer is staring him in the face. In the anime, it was easy to know which criminals Kira was targeting because large numbers of healthy criminals dying of inexplicable heart attacks isn't something you see on a day-to-day basis. Using heart attacks as a baseline for criminals judged by Kira was essential to establishing his behavior, which made L and the Kira task force members' deductions about which criminals Kira was targeting or manipulating far more believable. I could continue to prod at Netflix for making poor artistic decisions or creating logical inconsistencies in this movie for hours. Like how Light orchestrates a ridiculously over-the-top plan in order to get his girlfriend to burn the page of the Death Note where she wrote he would die, but when she grabs the page to throw it in the fire, it comes from inside the Death Note, which Light has had in his possession the entire time, meaning he could have burned it himself and avoided a ridiculous amount of work. But I digress. At the end of the day, it's just a movie, but it's a movie that's insulting to a series I care greatly about. I'm just relieved this movie was panned by both audiences and critics, which means this version's franchise potential is virtually non-existent. We can put this one up on the list next to all the other terrible Hollywood anime adaptations and pretend it never existed. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed listening to me complain about things for however long this video ends up, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more content. This was my first time doing any kind of video essay, so if you want to see me do more videos like this, let me know in the comments. But that's it for today. My name is Kevin Crust, and I'll see you guys next time.